Welcome back. If you notice the clock on the lower right of your screen, we're just over 1 day away from when the Obama administration says the U.S. will smack the debt ceiling. All attention is now on the Senate and the hope that Senators Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid can hammer out a deal that a deeply divided House could rally behind in some way. Here to tell us more about the deal, Senator Bob Casey from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He just came from the Senate floor, along, of course, with our own Gloria Borger and Dana Bash. So, Senator Casey, good to see you again.
Jake,
it's
an
all Pennsylvania evening here. So, Congressman Dent from your state said that he thinks, based on informed conversations, that tomorrow what will happen is whenever McConnell and Reid are done with their compromise, Boehner will just take it and he will just put it on the floor of the House, and it will be an open vote, even though it looks like the majority of the Republican Party in the House will not support it, but it will still pass likely with Democratic votes.
Well, I hope that's true. I don't know that for certain, but I hope that whatever is arrived at as a strategic kind of pathway, that we get there in short order, because we don't have enough time, obviously, to do things the way they're normally done. We've got a 24-hour window or even less. So I hope that's the case. But the good news here, I think, is that, and I could sense this tonight, having been in the Senate, that Majority Leader Reid and the Republican leader Mitch McConnell spent many hours today, and as soon as the House had the news that they weren't going to vote, they both went back into action, so to speak, sitting down and working together. So it's good news that they've met that long. I don't think the agreement is completed, but we hope it's an agreement that can open the government, make sure we pay our bills and don't default. That's very significant. And then getting on a track to have negotiations for short and long-term budget issues.
I heard Senate Democrats complaining about the fact that they thought today was a lost day. The McConnell and Reid were dealing. They were coming up with a compromise. Right. Then Boehner said, hold on, stop doing that. I have some things I want to do here in the House. Boehner and his leadership team twice tried to introduce legislation to the House Republican caucus. Twice were rejected. At the end of the day, McConnell and Reid start dealing again, but it's a lost day.
Yeah, I'm an optimist by nature, so when I heard the good news that the two Senate leaders had spent that much time together prior to that time period, I was optimistic that it was moving in the right direction. I was a lot more optimistic before noon than after noon, but it seems like it's back on track now, so that's good news.
What was so amazing is that Speaker Boehner, it seemed as though the reason why he tried to bring up one last bill that the House Republicans put together was to hand one last olive branch to conservatives, and they took the olive branch and they just kind of stuffed it back in his face. I mean, they were the ones who wouldn't allow this to come up. They were the reason why he had to pull the bill in a really tough way, an embarrassing way tonight. And I'm just curious, sort of going forward, I know maybe I'm taking it a couple steps forward, but do you think that given all of the animosity and the tough situation that we've been in, that he is a negotiating partner that Harry Reid can really have going forward? Because there are those big issues that still need to be dealt with.
Well, I think there does come a time when it's so late in the game and the stakes and the consequences are so high that people can rise above some of the disagreements and even rise above pressures that normally they would succumb to or be more reactive to. So we're hoping for that, and I think it's critically important for the country. I mean, the consequences of default are bone-crushing for the country. We cannot allow it to happen. So I think at least you're getting that kind of consensus.
So do you think you're actually going to make this deadline, or are you just going to tell everybody you're going to cut the deal so that the markets don't tank and say we're optimistic, but actually let it slide?
Well, fortunately for the country, there are people working on the procedural pathway here that know a lot more about Senate and House procedure than I do.
I've seen you in that Senate chair a lot.
You think they have a way they can maybe get a...
I think I don't think you'd see the kind of effort you've seen in the last 12 hours if there wasn't a pathway.
And I want to ask you this, because what's been striking to me is that you guys are usually pretty nice to each other in your caucuses. I mean, Republicans and Democrats may disagree, but in your own caucus, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, you kind of treat each other nicely. We heard last week about a Republican caucus in which Ted Cruz, almost every Republican member of the Senate stood up who was there and criticized him and said, why are you running ads against me in my state? If I lose, you're never going to get another Republican senator in my state. Have you seen evidence of this, and does it sort of surprise you as you watch it from the other side of the aisle?
I've only heard about it.
Well, what have you heard? Tell us.
No, I mean just a lot of division, a lot of acrimony, and that's one of the problems here. And until that is resolved, we're going to continue to, I think, have these kinds of problems. But in this particular case, resolved within the Republican Party.
But can you talk to us about that and how it plays out on the Senate floor in your observation?
Well, you could see it. I think you really could see it in plain view. The divisions. That one particular moment when Senator Bob Corker from Tennessee was standing not too far away from Senator Cruz and actually disagreeing with him on the floor in public. That you don't see that very often within a party. But having said all that, I think there's a consensus now among Senate Republicans that we've got to make sure we don't default and we should open up the government. So those two imperatives alone, I think, allow us to move forward.
Let's backtrack to this morning when House Republicans announced that they had this plan. It would reopen the government for a short amount of time. It would raise the debt ceiling. But it did two things. It, first of all, would require that all members of the House, Senate, the President, Vice President, cabinet officials, all of them had to enter the Obamacare exchanges with no subsidy. And then also it would repeal the medical device tax, which I know a lot of Democrats in the Senate, as well as Republicans, would agree with.
I'm for repeal.
Yeah.
You're for repeal,
Exactly.
Yes, of course, because there's a lot of medical device companies in Pennsylvania. So I heard liberal commentators say, that seems like a reasonable counteroffer from House Republicans. Good, maybe this will be done. But immediately the White House, and I believe Harry Reid, said, no, we're not going to do that. Ultimately, I guess that bargaining technique worked to a degree, but I think if you could explain why no was the default there for the president and Harry Reid, when, like I said, a lot of liberal commentators said that's not so crazy.
Well, I can't speak for how they arrived at it, but I do know that sometimes you're reacting to one part of an agreement or several parts. The part of the proposal that the House was pushing, and I think some Senate Republicans, was the so-called extraordinary measures that every president should have in place so that when you're getting close to the end of a period of time when the debt ceiling is at risk or the debt level is at risk, that the Treasury Department can have those extraordinary measures to go beyond and have maybe even months of time instead of just days or weeks. So the fact that that provision was prominent today, I think, caused a lot of opposition, I think, on our side. I would hope that people in both parties would object to that, because you never want to have a president and Treasury Secretary without options when they're getting closer to a deadline. So I think that was as prominent as anything today in terms of what would trigger opposition.
Interesting, because I didn't really hear that as the issue. Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, thank you so much for coming in.
Great to see you.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks for making it a big Pennsylvania night.
It is. It's huge. It's huge.